Welcome to the walkthrough of frequently made mistakes I saw when reviewing Assignment 4 submissions in CS 253 in the fall of 2023. Make sure to first of all document and format your code thoroughly and consistently. We've gone over this many times before. People still are not commenting the code or are commenting the code and formatting the code inconsistently. So make sure you follow the instructions that I've given many times. Let's take a look at some problems with defining the M0 field. You can see here that this is incorrect. This is described in this video, so go back and watch the video. Likewise, this is also incorrect. There's a very straightforward way to initialize M0. Make sure you go watch the video. It shows exactly how to do that. We covered that in class the other day, and I've shown a number of examples in class as well. Get in the habit of not defining local variables like this, but instead chain things together using the Fluent interface pattern. Make sure, as we've said in previous assignments, there's only one call to filter, and use a composite conditional rather than having two calls to filter, which is really unnecessary. Down here in crawl page async, there's no need to call filter with objects non-null, since this is returning a completable future. Get page async is returning a completable future, not an object. Something important is missing here, so make sure you fix that. Don't use page future then compose here. Just call images on page and page links async and pass in the page future as the first parameter. And finally, this is the wrong value to return. We're trying to return a completable future to an integer. So whatever you do, do not return a completable future to a null, which is not correct at all. Let's take a look at some issues with images on page and page links async. There's something important missing here with depth that you need to fix. And something else is missing here, which is calling the method that's going to combine the results, and never ever return null from a method that expects to return a completable future to an integer. Chaos and insanity will ensue. No need to pass this parameter here because the fork join pool is the default if you use the one parameter version of supply async. This code is incomplete and incorrect. I'm not really sure what's trying to go on here, but make sure you go and watch the frequently made mistakes videos, which shows a number of ways to do code for this method, which of course you'll need to improve, but it gives you the basic ideas. Down here, images on page async. This is too complicated. Just pass a method reference to a helper method that's defined in the image crawler Java file that returns a stream of all the image sourced URLs in the document. Much cleaner than doing this. Down here, images on page async. This is the wrong method to call here. Not sure why you're calling crawl hyperlinks on page, since that's going to go ahead and do a recursive call, but instead call the helper method in image crawler Java that gets a stream of all the image sourced URLs in the document. Make sure you're using method references, not lambda expressions here. This is something that our unit test can't catch, but you need to get in the habit of doing. I've mentioned this dozens of times now. Please replace this call with a method reference to a helper method defined in image crawler Java that gets a stream of all the image source URLs in this document. Don't create your own private helper methods, especially if you're going to implement them incorrectly. So this needs to go away entirely and be replaced with the code above. Down here, again, please replace all of this stuff with a single call to a helper method, actually a method reference to a helper method that's defined in image crawler Java that gets a stream of all the image source URLs in the document. I know I went over this multiple times in the previous frequently made mistakes videos that we did, so you should really have gotten that one figured out by now or come to office hours for help. Down here, don't use then compose, but instead you want to use a two-stage completion method, chain with then apply async followed by then compose async. And this implementation is just way too complicated. It should just be passing in simple method references. Way too complicated. I think we went over that in the previous preliminary frequently made mistakes videos as well, so you really should have gotten that one right. Down here, use then compose async instead of then compose. And gosh, this is complicated and confusing. You need to refactor this stuff in a whole bunch of different ways as per the discussion up here, using then apply async followed by then compose async. And this code is just way too complicated. You need to fix it and make it a lot more clean. Here's the issues for combine results. You should watch the video that we went over in class earlier this week that shows some examples of what to pass as the second parameter to then combine. It's really straightforward. It's just a method reference. Likewise, replace this lambda expression with the same method reference that we showed in the other video above. Make sure you format and document your code consistently and thoroughly. So this should be like that with a comment here. And also you don't need to make this call. You don't need to make this call. And you don't need to pass +1 here if you do it properly where it's supposed to go. Don't be creating new helper methods. They're not helping you, especially if they're implemented incorrectly. So make sure you watch the frequently made mistakes videos to see how to do this code. I'm not sure why this is even here, but it doesn't belong here. Make sure that you get in the habit of using the fluent interface pattern rather than using a bunch of local variables. You should be chaining these things together and commenting them, of course. And then make sure you use the method reference here instead of a lambda expression. Once again, we've gone over this dozens of times. There's no need to perform this call asynchronously. It should be synchronous because adding two values together is very simple. It doesn't take very long. This code here is just way too complicated. There should just be a single method reference to a helper method that's defined later in the file. Use collect here with the appropriate collector, just like you had done in crawl hyperlinks on page instead of doing all of this extra stuff. Remember, my goal is to try to have refactored code that abides by the do not repeat yourself principle, the dry principle. Down here, this code is way too complicated. There should be no try catch block in here. I'm not sure what's going on here. You should be calling a helper method rather than doing transform image null. There should not be a null here. You should take a look at the frequently made mistakes video and look at other methods defined in this file to see what to do. There should definitely be no try catch block. Down here, you don't need to check if this is null. There's no need to call map here. That's also unnecessary. There's another terminal operation that will do this counting of 0 or 1 for you. That's much cleaner. Just give you a hint as to what the method's called. This code is backwards. We've gone over this multiple times now in previous frequently made mistakes videos for the other assignments. Go take a look at sequentialloopscrawler.java to see the order in which these methods need to be called. Here's a hint. Create new cache item needs to go before apply transform. And you need to do some error checking here as well. And there's no need to say count greater than 0, 1, or 0. Just return count. This implementation is way too complicated. Do pretty much the same thing you did in assignment B as described in the walkthrough video. This is also too complicated. There should just be a single terminal operation here. And this is not the right terminal operation to use. And make sure also that you don't use or else get. Use or else, and don't use completed future, use M0. Now, I'm not even sure if this is the right method to call here. There may be a better method to call than doing all of this stuff. I think you want to use a different terminal operation. But for those of you who used or else get in other parts of your code, don't use or else get. There's no need to use a supplier lambda here. Instead, you want to use or else with M0. So those are the frequently made mistakes that I saw in my review. A lot of people would have saved themselves a lot of hassle and me a lot of hassle if you had watched the previous frequently made mistakes videos we've done earlier in this week, because I went through a lot of this stuff before. Make sure you fix all these things before the final solution is going to be graded, because otherwise you will lose major points.